After 15 years, 33 films, 5 short films, 29 seasons of television, and almost $30 billion at the global box office, making it the highest grossing film franchise of all time, with Star Wars in second, behind by almost $20 billion, audiences and critics have now begun saying, are we witnessing the death of the MCU?
Get up, cocksuckers, it's all over. Listen, we had a rough couple of months.
After the release of that Variety article, I thought it would be fun to do an analysis of the current state of the MCU, and if it is as bad as some people have you think. Following the release of The Marvels, which now has the record as the MCU's lowest grossing film ever, and the MCU's first proper box office bomb, now seemed the perfect time to look at the current state of affairs at Marvel Studios and discuss what is happening, and if it really is as bad as it all seems. Firstly, I thought it was beneficial to look at the performance of the most recently completed phase of the MCU up against all previous phases. I've not included Phase 5 in this list as only 3 films have been released, which have consisted of a box office bomb, an underperforming film, and one of the most successful films of the year. So for this analysis, I added together all the box office returns and budgets of each phase of the MCU, minus the Avengers films as frankly they don't count. I then divided the total number by the amount of films released in each phase. This gave an average of each film's box office return and budget, which makes for interesting reading. Phase 4, based purely on the numbers, was actually the second best performing phase of the entire MCU, although Phase 4 did have the highest budget. There are obviously so many other factors to consider, but when people say the MCU is dead or has died or is dying, I think that is somewhat hyperbole, because as you can see from purely a box office point of view, the films are still massively successful. Comparing this as well to the MCU's counterpart, the DCEU, which has had 8 films on the bounce which have lost the studio money, the MCU is doing pretty well. Moving on to Rotten Tomatoes scores, we can see that actually Phase 4 was the joint lowest rated phase of the MCU, and was coming off the back of the highest rated phase, and here is in which we find the problems with the MCU. I do believe Marvel finds itself at a crossroads currently. Whilst all their competitors around them have faltered and changed course or abandoned projects, the MCU has maintained a fantastic ability to continue on. But with recent poor box office and critical reception results, something of which the MCU has not experienced under Kevin Feige, it is said now the MCU is looking at changing direction, and this has some fans worried the MCU could be on its last legs. So, let's look at how the MCU went from releasing the highest grossing film in 2019 to one of the biggest box office bombs of 2023. Coming off the back of Endgame, a film which was the culmination of 11 years of storytelling, Marvel Studios had a choice: let the franchise rest, or continue saturating the market with more films and prolonging the story. The studio chose more films. And why weren't they? Marvel was coming off the back of its most successful period. Now was the time to cash in. People loved Marvel, and surely we're not tired of Marvel content. So, the MCU had another bright idea. Expanded to TV series, which would link directly into the MCU. I mean, people clearly love the MCU, so give them more and more content. The problem is, the general audience cannot keep up with such a massive amount of content that the MCU was producing. In 2021, Marvel released 9 films or TV series, and another 9 in 2022. So whenever a Marvel release was coming to its natural conclusion in the theatres or on streaming, you can bet within 2 weeks a new Marvel project was being released over 2 straight years. That is oversaturation. And me, even the biggest nerd and loser, hasn't even seen all of these projects, because I simply can't keep up. The problem you have is once audiences feel the story is getting too far ahead of them, they're less likely to go back and catch up. When it's an Avengers film, sure, go back, watch 1 or 2 films, and hey, you're up to scratch. But I think the perfect example of how this saturation has pushed away general audience members is with the release of The Marvels. A sequel to Captain Marvel, this film had nothing to do with that previous film, and instead audiences are met with 2 additional lead characters, coupled with Brie Larson's Captain Marvel. Now these 2 additional leads were introduced in 2 separate shows on Disney+. But wait, there is more! Samuel Jackson's Nick Fury has been off on his own adventures in Secret Invasion. The series The Marvels follows straight after. So we have a sequel film which required audiences to watch 18 episodes of television over 3 different series, and the film also acts as a sequel to a film released 5 years ago. Can you see how it's hard to keep up? And I think a major component to blame for this is COVID. 2020 starved the world of Marvel projects, which actually in turn helped the MCU's Disney Plus projects. I remember in 2021 the buzz and hype around WandaVision. Finally, some Marvel content after almost 18 months without anything. Of course, everyone was at home due to lockdown, and WandaVision was a hit. And then so was Falcon and Winter Soldier, and again with Loki. So the MCU's first 3 series were certified hits, thanks in parts a lockdown which made people watch their content, and due to there being a rather large gap between the last Marvel release in 2019. The problem is, Marvel appeared to take this as a definite thumbs up for the new projects being pushed out, and it was time to ramp up production line. And I think a major annoyance amongst fans is, despite so many Marvel projects being released, the overarching storyline of the MCU has barely progressed, with fans not really understanding where this phase is going and the implications of what is to come. And issue 1 is what leads into the issue of quality control. With 18 projects releasing in the space of 22 months, resources are stretched pretty thin at Marvel Studios. With head honcho Kevin Feige overseeing essentially all projects, his time is becoming more and more limited. Despite popular belief, the first 3 phases of the MCU were not actually mapped out, and the Infinity War Endgame finale was conjured up during production of Phase 2. Joss Whedon has even gone on record as saying he had no plans for Thanos. He just decided to add him in at the end of the first Avengers film because why not? And James Gunn essentially made up the Infinity Stones backstory in an hour. The MCU regularly made many last-minute changes and alterations to various films in order to serve wider plot points. This was helped by the fact Feige had a pretty large oversight of everything heading out of the door. So up to release date, things were pretty manic at Marvel Studios, but the quality rarely dipped, and the chaos was expertly managed in order to serve the story and retool and reimagine various plot points and threads. With more projects, people have less time to rework the story and less resources to work on any issues, which has brought into question the CGI of recent Marvel projects. Without a doubt, one of the biggest problems with Marvel Studios' recent productions is the quality of the CGI. In the space of 4 years, Marvel has gone from producing Thanos, one of the best computer-generated characters in film history, to this.
He almost tasted that. Num, eat it up. Go play okay, 3, 2, 1. You know I'm the hottest, you ain't
And this again is an issue to the oversaturation going on at Marvel. With more deadlines and less time to complete projects, many of these issues are slipping through the net as there is no time to fix them, and so it appears in order to meet release dates and continue producing more and more content, Marvel is letting through the bare minimum of quality, and thus they can continue the gravy train of Marvel content. In August of 2020, Chadwick Boseman sadly passed away after a long battle with cancer. An actor who had a glittering career ahead of them had it painfully cut short, and the world lost a huge talent. I don't really want to dwell too much on this issue, but I do think it's important in the context of the MCU. I think in turn this has massively hurt the MCU. After Endgame retired their 2 most famous characters and their biggest stars, Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr., now was the time for a new charismatic star to lead the MCU. And I think it is not coincidental that in this scene of the heroes returning, Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther is the first character to reappear. For me, a sign that Marvel understood who their most recognisable character was and a clear signal of the new changing of the guard. The MCU has always been fantastic at finding charming, charismatic actors to fill their roles, and in part has been a huge reason for the MCU's success. With Chadwick Boseman, they'd struck gold again, and with the addition of actors such as Benedict Cumberbatch and Tom Holland, the MCU had a new slew of actors to lead the next stage of their story, with Boseman at the forefront. However, with his tragic passing, the MCU feels very depleted of big name actors who can match the charm and charisma of Downey Jr. and Chris Evans. The next stage of MCU stories, I believe, were to be told around Boseman, and now the MCU needs to look at their other actors to step forward with Tom Holland as the new face of the MCU. However, with less than engaging stories being told, no characters have broken out as a new fan favourite, and the MCU is at a loss for new, marketable characters to base their cinematic universe on. Okay, so we all know of Jonathan Majors' personal issues and the court case that now surrounds him. Obviously, this has had a major effect on the MCU's planning for their future films and setting out their ultimate big bad villain. However, I don't really want to dwell or comment on these issues because I think they're pretty clear to everyone and there isn't much more to be said about them. However, what I do want to discuss is how Marvel have went about setting up their new big bad villain, Kang. Thanos appeared sporadically in the 10 years before his eventual appearance in Infinity War, appearing in 2 cameo scenes and being a minor character in the Guardians of the Galaxy, where his role was fairly similar to that of Emperor Palpatine in The Empire Strikes Back, as kind of the man behind the curtain, the overarching villain, who our main villains actually answer to. This makes them seem more daunting and powerful to the audience. This approach differs vastly to that of Kang, who so far has had 3 major appearances in the MCU, appearing in 2 seasons of Loki and being the main antagonist in Ant-Man Quantumania. Something I find highly peculiar. Whilst his first appearance in Loki season 1 was actually quite interesting and helped to set up some backstory and lore into how this whole multiverse storyline actually works, his appearance in Ant-Man was, least to say, absolutely bizarre. The fact he is the main villain is an odd choice, but the fact he is beaten at the end of the film and in a pretty standard and unspectacular fashion, like most MCU villains, further diminishes this character. Trying to create an iconic villain is hard. The fact Marvel achieved this with Thanos is a testament to everyone at the MCU. I believe what helped them in crafting this character is the initial reluctance to actually show Thanos. By just dropping hints to him, the audience were able to build up in their minds before eventually meeting him. Of course, this can ultimately backfire, as rarely can anything live up to expectation. However, this method set the groundwork for Thanos. He was the ultimate villain for our heroes to face, and we knew he would not be easily defeated. However, with Kang, we've seen him lose twice. And some fans may say, well, the scary thing about Kang is he keeps coming back. However, it is hard to build up an ultimate villain if your characters have been able to defeat him so many times. Once from stabbing him and another time just punching him. The character being an already defeated villain gives no build up to him, or gives any reasons to the audience as to why we should actually care about this guy. I mean, he talks about killing Avengers and tells Ant-Man he's out of his league, but he still defeats him. At the moment, Marvel are just telling viewers this guy is all powerful and you should take our word for it, without actually showing anything. Compared to Thanos, whose very first action scene in the MCU is him easily defeating Hulk, the strongest Avenger. Immediately, we know, hey, this villain, he poses a threat to our heroes. I know the post-credit scene hints at more Kangs to come, but who really cares? One Avenger has already defeated him, so who cares how many Kangs there are? So there you have it. They're just some of the reasons I believe the MCU is kind of faltering at the moment. I don't actually believe it's on its last legs or dying. I think Kevin Feige knows exactly what he needs to do to actually resurrect the universe and for it to continue to be successful, and I still think it will be because I trust people at Marvel. I think they know what they are doing. I will make a second part to this video and I'll talk about things that Marvel can do to improve But for now, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.